1999 The Podcast is a production of the Cage Club Podcast Network. For more podcasts on movies, comics, and all things pop culture, head to cageclub.me. To contact us with questions, comments, or just to say hi, send us an email at 1999@cageclub.me. You can find me on Twitter at probablyrealjb and Joey at soulpopped. And you can follow the show on Twitter at 1999 The Podcast. To support the show, please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. The show is written, produced, and edited by us. Welcome to 1999 The Podcast. I am John Brooks.
And I'm Joey Lewandowski.
Joey, how are you today?
I am good. I'm ready to destroy something beautiful.
That's exciting.
This podcast. I'm going to destroy the podcast. What we call the podcast Angel Face behind the scenes. We're like the Angel Face Project. We're going to destroy the podcast.
Operation Chaos.
Yeah.
Is that what it's called?
Mayhem.
Yeah.
Project Mayhem. You don't have either words right, but you were in the ballpark.
Anyways, I want to start today by saying hello to our new listeners. I know that over the last couple months, more and more of you have discovered us and started listening. And so thanks and hi. And if we don't know you already, send us an email and say hello and tell us what you like and don't like about the show and movies you want us to cover and guests you want us to have and whatever you want. We'd love to hear from you. So we are at, again, 1999 at cageclub.me. That is 1999 at cageclub.me.
The numbers, not the words. The numbers.
The numbers. Don't have to spell out.
That'd be good. I could make that email, though. Do you want me to make that email? 1999ONENINENINE at cageclub.me? Yeah, because we have unlimited emails, so...
I actually don't want you to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Saves me 35 seconds. All right.
Would anybody think that, do you think? Would they be like,
oh,
okay,
boy.
NINE, they wouldn't, right? That seems stupid.
No, probably not. I mean, with like Too Fast, Too Forever, I guess that's more because that's I don't know.
Yeah.
But still, nobody's even thinking of for that, so I don't know. Go listen to my Fast and Furious podcast.
You might have this one big Too Fast fan who's just been sending you emails for years and years and years.
I wish that there was like a way to, how like when you send an email to a thing that doesn't exist, like it bounces back. Yeah. Like I wish that there was like a catch-all, like if anybody sends any email to any cageclub.me email address that doesn't actually exist, forward it here.
Yeah. Or like a did you mean, like when you Google something, it just kind of automatically corrects it. Mm-hmm. But I could see that being a problem with people who have similar emails, getting a lot of emails from other people, so that might not work. But anyway, yes, 1999 at cageclub.me. Say hello, tell us what you think, and hello back. So Joey, today we are at October the 15th of 1999, not surprisingly. Not much going on that day in history, except that this is the day that the National Geographic Society revealed the fossil of the Archaeoraptor in a press conference, a fossil that later turned out to be a forgery. So
ooh, that's very exciting. I don't think I knew that.
Dinosaur-based scandal, if you didn't know about that one.
No.
Yeah. So this was right in the midst of, so Jurassic Park was like 6 years earlier, right? And it was before this sort of widespread acceptance of the birds are dinosaurs, science was widespread and accepted at a time when it was still kind of a fringe theory. And so there was, I think it was a combination of like mistaken archaeology or paleontology plus a hoax that was the missing link. Like the Archaeoraptor was the missing link between dinosaurs and birds that, proved once and for all.
Sure.
And so anyway, it was based on a lot of bad science and misinterpretation and so on. So it still is the case, but this was not the smoking gun that was revealed at the time. But yeah, anyway, that was the biggest news of the day of October the 15th. But it was also the day that a movie starring Ed Norton, Brad Pitt, Helena Bonham Carter, Meatloaf, Zach Grenier, one of the other Arquettes, and Jared Leto, directed by David Fincher and based on the book by Chuck Palahniuk. Today we are talking about Fight Club.
I remember hearing stories about Edward Norton and Brad Pitt going to see screenings of this like opening weekend and like cringing in the back of the auditorium because no one liked it, nobody got it, and they were so embarrassed. So if you're trying to set yourself in the mood and the place and in the time and the spirit, imagine you are a world famous actor about to become even bigger and you're in a thing where you make a movie that is, maybe an undeniable classic. We'll talk about that in the episode. And just no one gets it, no one likes it, and you want to die a little bit.
It's sort of like um, the Shadow World version of Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, like watching screenings of No Way Home, doing the same thing,
Right.
but everybody's like
Losing their minds.
gloriously enwrapped. And they're in the back in like creepy baseball caps, being like, hell yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, all right. So although it risks breaking the first rule and second rule of Fight Club, Joey, can you talk to us about Fight Club? What is this movie about?
It is about a guy who cannot sleep and he has a dead end job and he tries to find solace or comfort or whatever in any number of ways. He goes to support groups, he, makes new friends, and then all of a sudden he meets this too handsome, too cool, too whatever guy played by Brad Pitt. Oh, the first guy is Edward Norton. He is not named in the movie. He's called the narrator, I
Mm,
believe. In the book, maybe he's Jack because there's Jack's I am Jack's liver, whatever. But he's just the narrator. He meets Brad Pitt playing Tyler Durden, and the two of them embark on a will they won't they romance, basically, where they start fight clubs where just dudes secretly fight one another across the country, and it becomes this thing about cults and uh, going too far and all sorts of different stuff. And it's a pretty good satire, I think, of you know what happens when groupthink takes over, and then in the end, spoiler alert, as there is on every one of these episodes, we find out that Tyler Durden is just a part of the narrator's psyche, and he essentially kills himself, or like he tricks his brain into thinking he's killing himself, killing Tyler
mm.
Durden, but surviving, and maybe living a happy life with Helena Bonham Carter, who is just this woman who he meets at a support group. But that's a very, I think people know the story to Fight Club. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, might need a reminder, but
Probably.
I think most of them remember the plot twist at the end. It's kind of like when we talked about Sixth Sense,
Yeah.
right? If there's one thing you remember, it's that like last sequence. Um, Finding out that Tyler Durden is the narrator. Honestly, like it's one of those ones that I think a lot of people got along the way, if they hadn't read the book before. But yeah, it's obviously built around this kind of big plot twist, and the plot twist, again, like the Sixth Sense, kind of rewrites, I think, a lot of the way that you see the movie. Like it's not just a fun twist. It is important to sort of understanding what the underlying themes are.
And I think, like the Sixth Sense, it works. Like the twist, if you
Yeah,
go back and watch, like there's the scene is like I never saw Tyler and Marla in the same room. You're like, are they the same person? It's like, no, it's just they're not in the same room because like the three of them can't be in the same room for the same reason that you know what I mean? It's the same, it's the
right.
inverse or whatever. So yeah, for sure.
Right. And we'll talk about some of what some people think the themes are at the end of the intro here. So I'll get back to that. But much like our last movie, American Beauty, Fight Club's reputation and reception has not remained stagnant over the years. And in fact, the movie was a giant box office bomb. With a budget of $65 million, which was the same as Jurassic Park, just 6 years earlier, which tells you quite a bit about how budgets changed.
That's actually surprisingly high for I would think like I think this movie looks
A
great.
lot of that's Brad Pitt money.
I'm sure, but like this movie looks great, but I feel like I don't know where that money goes, really.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Jurassic Park, it's like computers. There you go. There's $65 million in computers.
yeah. Well, nobody on Jurassic Park was paid like $10 million for being in the movie, and I'm pretty sure Brad Pitt was. So that's a lot of that
Oh, I will say,
goes right there.
totally unrelated to Fight Club, but although not really, there is a great article that was, I need to find out what publication it was, but it was written by Otessa Moshfegh, who is an author that I really love. Um,
Hmm.
but there was just this big profile on Brad Pitt and how he's sort of become this kind of mercurial kind of thing. In GQ, it's called Brad Pitt's Wildest Dreams. Came out about 2 weeks ago, and so if you want more of the Brad Pitt of the like, because the $20 million a movie kind of thing, where it's like this guy is a movie star, like he's on a dying breed of movie stars, and so yeah, he gets paid,
Yeah,
and that's where the budget goes. But I just love the writer. She has a couple great novels, and was excited to read this. So if you want more Brad Pitt, if you're like, ooh, what's he been up to? Check this out on GQ.
and we will link to that in the social media. But with a budget of $65 million, the movie made just $37 million at the domestic box office, which made it the 54th highest grossing movie in America that year, in front of My Favorite Martian, which came in 55th, and one position behind 10 Things I Hate About You, which should be said had a budget that was less than a quarter that of Fight Club's. So 10 Things I Hate About You, while just one slot ahead of Fight Club in terms of the box office gross, was a much bigger hit. It made money, whereas Fight Club lost quite a lot of it,
John, then I need to know, if
especially.
this was such a bomb, why are we covering it in season 1 of 1999, The Podcast?
Well, I'll get to that in a second. Worldwide, it barely topped $100 million. And so what really sets this movie apart is that this is the first movie that really became a cultural phenomenon with its release on home video,
Ooh.
specifically on digital video or versatile disc, depending on who you ask. Some listeners might not remember DVDs. They were a lot much like Blu-ray, except not as good. But were very, very good at the time. Fight Club came out, what I would say, like early in the DVD game. DVDs had been around for a couple years. They were fairly niche for a while, and the idea of buying yourself a DVD library, which I know you can relate to,
I sure
which
can.
is something that both of us can relate to, that a lot of people, sort of within the general like decade and a half
Yeah,
span
at
of.
one point, no longer, but yes, I think
No,
most
right.
people were like, these are my favorite movies. I want to own them forever."
And it was different too because like people didn't do that so much with VHS unless you were really a giant film nerd, right? Like people didn't really buy VHS in the
Well,
same way they
they
bought
they were, like,
DVDs.
prohibitively expensive when they first came out. Like, I remember, like,
Yeah.
I'm too young for that, as is the theme of this show, but, like, I remember, VCRs were, like, $1,000. It's not, it may be that, but, like, $1,000, and, like, VHSs were, like, $100 each. It's like, well, how many like, even today, like, I love movies, but, like, how many movies do I love that it will cost me $100 to own? Like, very few, probably.
Mhm. Yeah, it's worth pointing out, like, one of the things that made DVD different, though, like, is that it was just they're smaller. Like, they're like books. They
Yeah,
fit, right? They're like mass market, paperback books. They fit on a shelf, whereas, like, VHS took up about 4 times as much space, right, as a DVD does.
yeah.
It's important, like, this is probably a forgotten memory right now, but The Phantom Menace was the first Star Wars movie released on DVD, and there was a lot of hemming and hawing as to like whether or not that was even going to happen because it didn't come out on DVD at first; it just came out on VHS. There's a lot of resistance to the idea of DVD and like the the viability of it, and sort of like how much it was worth putting in the money to create something on DVD that was worth selling to an audience, right? So, yeah, again, like this is still DVD is still very much kind of up in the air. Really, the sort of glory days of DVD were between roughly '99 and probably I don't know 2010
Well, because
ish, right?
this is the year that I think things pivot. Like, I don't remember when we got a DVD player. It's probably a couple years after this, but I remember, and I think I probably talked about it on that episode, that my friend, the first time I saw The Matrix was like in either 99 or 2000, probably 2000. Well, I don't know, maybe it was 99, but it was because his family had just gotten a DVD player and that was their first movie. And so
Yeah,
this is definitely the turning point where it's like, oh, yeah, this is
yeah,
cool. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And so it's because Fincher kind of believed in DVD as a format and as a way of consuming film that changed Fight Club's fortune. Fight Club's DVD won awards. Like,
really.
yeah, so it was the Online Film Critics Society Award for Best DVD, Best DVD Commentary, and Best DVD Special Features. It became known as kind of a DVD movie. It included 4 separate audio commentaries and just like an absolute ton of special features. And Fincher oversaw the development and production of all of those, right? So he was basically doing a second directing job when it came to putting together the actual, the DVD edition of Fight Club. And so much of Fight Club's failure in the theaters might have been due to its kind of, it's got a frenetic kind of aesthetic and it's got sort of this unconventional storytelling approach. And that fits much more in line with sort of the music video genre that Fincher became famous for before he transitioned to film, and much less comfortably with the kind of traditional high drama stuff that we tend to see in the fall and winter in movie theaters, especially back then when those were sort of the award bait movies. We did American Beauty last week. American Beauty came out just a little bit before Fight Club, right, and was obviously Academy Award bait, and that's sort of like what that time of the season is for. Like Fight Club was almost as though it was a independent film that was a big budget independent film on a lot of theater screens, and so like that sort of, it was in that weird transition state, and that's, I think, part of the reason why it was a failure, at least at first. DVDs also have this kind of like, whether or not the interactivity of DVDs is real, it's kind of beside the point. But there's this feeling that you're interacting with the DVD. There's a feeling of something like much more kind of personal and intimate and like direct with DVD that you don't get in the theater as well. And I think that was also important for the sort of visceral nature of Fight Club as a movie. So yeah, it's the first movie that really made its name on DVD, and it makes a ton of sense as to why that would be
Well,
the
I think it's
case.
also like the word of mouth thing. I think that this is the kind of
Yeah,
movie that is clearly not for everyone, but for the
yeah.
people who either don't go to movies or didn't hear about it or whatever, they're like, "Oh, no, you need to see this movie," and I feel like, especially with, whether it's a rental or an own or whatever, it makes a lot of sense that this is the one that would kind of blow, like, I think maybe even more so, maybe The Sixth Sense, but, like, that was such a box office hit that it feels like people had already seen that, right? But, like, this is not the biggest movie that we've covered this
Yeah,
year.
and like Blair Witch's word of mouth happened before the movie came out, right? So like it had that sort of it had that sort of effect, but like before it even hit theaters, whereas this didn't have that sort of lead-in campaign that was incredibly unique
Right.
to Blair
Like, I
Witch.
think the only movie of the 6 that we've covered so far before this one that I would sort of compare in terms of the, like, maybe a little bit unknown or underground that people might have missed in theaters might have been The Matrix, because it was, people that
Mhm.
directors that people didn't
Right,
really know yet. I mean, unless
right.
they'd seen Bound, but, like, Venom Menace was enormous, Blair Witch had such word of mouth, people knew Kubrick, Sixth Sense had such word of mouth, American Beauty won all these awards, and so all these movies, you either saw them or you're probably never going to, or to some extent. But this, like The Matrix, I think is just kind of a, and I think maybe it's just like it's weird that they're both kind of the most aggro, targeted toward a specific type of person. Like, I think that The Matrix and Fight Club have like very comparable audiences at first glance, maybe. And I don't know if that has anything in common or not, but who knows?
Well, on that note, it's worth remembering that at this point, Fincher was still a relatively minor player. I mean, he wasn't a major, huge name director. He'd only directed three prior features: Alien 3, Seven, and The Game. At that point, and all three have since found like loving cult followings. And Seven earned him a relatively large hit. Right, it wasn't a massive blockbuster, but it was definitely a success. It made more than $100 million. But none of them like none of them blew the industry away to the point where they're like, we must have Fincher direct all of our movies from now on, right? And even saying that, Fight Club still was his lowest grossing movie of those four. So it was certainly his biggest failure, even if that's kind of a short career. Of course, he's gone on to direct really, really big, critically acclaimed films, right? Including, of course, The Social Network, and then Mank this past year. Is that this
Sure.
past year?
No, it's 2
Yeah.
years ago.
Oh my god. Ugh, time is a flat circle.
Mhm.
Um, but he was not the David Fincher then that he is today. You couldn't sell a movie to a studio or to an audience with Fincher's name then the way that you probably can now. Its current ranking on Rotten Tomatoes with critics is 79%. I think that's a number that's actually gone up over time. And tellingly, it has a 96% audience score. And it's pretty similar on Metacritic. It's got a score of 66 and an audience score of 8.9. Some critics loved the film at the time, some absolutely eviscerated it, but of those in the middle, the criticism seemed to be that the tone was confused and the message kind of unclear. And many of them worried that viewers would walk away with the wrong message. So I guess that begs the question, like what we were talking about earlier, the themes of Fight Club. What is the message of Fight Club and what are its themes? And that seems to be a question that is entirely dependent on who it is that you're asking.
And maybe how intelligent they are, maybe.
Maybe how thoughtful they are.
Sure.
No, I don't think it takes an enormous amount of intelligence to understand some of the themes of Fight Club. I don't think it's ambiguous, but I do think it is a good criticism to say that it is not explicit in telling you how you're supposed to read it. And plenty of different academics and critics have picked it apart and come to their own conclusions. Some of the common ones that you will find are that it's about consumerism or late stage capitalism, or it's about the kind of the narrowing of the definition of masculinity and the way that people respond to and reject those definitions. There have been pieces that say it's anti-fascist, that it's pro-fascist, or that it's just kind of broadly about the battle for identity and free will within a sort of an overbearing culture that defines your character for you. And of course, as you alluded to earlier, that is helped along by the fact that the narrator, the main character of the story, is literally nameless, right, the
Mhm.
entire time. And so is kind of a blank slate. And that Edward Norton is sort of got the look of a guy who could be anybody,
Yeah.
right? Like Ed Norton is not very, very sort of contrary to Brad Pitt, is not someone who you would stop in the middle of the street and be like, whoa.
Right, and I do think that, another movie that we're not doing this season that I hope we'll do next season because it's still I think The Matrix is gonna be my favorite movie that we do because that's just what it is, but
Yeah.
maybe, one of the very few movies I could challenge it, I feel like has a lot in common with half of this movie, or maybe not even half of it, maybe way less, but Office Space. Like the Ron
Mm.
Livingston is like it's kind of like a hey, my job sucks too. It's just like I hate my boss. It's like that kind of like, don't you wish things were better? And I feel like there's probably this kind of like unease or unrest. And for Edward Norton to just be like this, relatively clean cut, but not exactly sort of nameless, kind of faceless guy. It's like, yeah, this me on screen.
Agreed, and I can neither confirm nor deny that Office Space episode will be out on October the 31st, also known as Halloween. So
Ooh, I'm gonna wear a flare for Halloween.
and we got a great guest for that one who was very enthusiastic about being on it. So yeah, that's a ways away. We're not at Halloween yet, despite I know some of our listeners think it's always Halloween,
Is
and
our
that's
guest the one who
cool.
just applied for friend of the show status, or is it somebody different?
It's somebody else, but
Okay.
we'll have to have that person on at some point as well. Either way, one thing is for sure, Fight Club continues to assert its relevance in a cultural environment that continues ever more to reflect its vision, and that is why we invited today's guest, who, Joey, is...
Today's guest is Amanda Moore, aka Frank, who spent a year infiltrating the MAGA movement and going native with the alt-right and neo-Nazis.
I'm sure that was a fun experience. All right, we'll be right back with Amanda and Fight Club.
A weird question. Can you hear, like, it just started raining here, which is fine. I'm not worried about the weather, but it's like hitting on my window air conditioning unit. Can you hear that noise or no?
Wait.
You should not, but I just want to make sure.
No.
Cool. Okay, then we're
good. Amanda, welcome to 1999, the podcast. We are delighted to have you. And I have to say, so when Joey and I were plotting out the podcast and thinking about guests for various movies, this one was a tricky one, but I was like, I think it'd be cool to have Amanda on because Amanda's kind of lived Fight Club in some ways. It's kind of been your life for a little while. So would you like to briefly kind of introduce yourself and tell a little bit about the story of your life in the last few years?
Sure. So I went undercover during COVID into the far right, kind of by accident. My job was gone because of the pandemic. My whole industry was gone, not just my job. So it wasn't like I could do something else. And I live in DC, so I went to, the first Stop the Steal rally after Trump lost the election, because it was in my neighborhood, And after that, a podcast asked me to go to the next one because they knew I would go anyway. And I went and recorded for them. And then I was like, well, I'll go to the third one and, maybe I'll write an article or record some more audio and sell it to somebody else. And then the insurrection happened at the third one. So I kind of fell more deep into being undercover. Went to CPAC in Florida in February, and there a neo-Nazi recruited me to help his grassroots organization recruit more members of Congress. And that was that.
I can't watch CPAC on TV. Like, it makes me so furious just to watch it on television. I literally, like, when I watch even journalists who report from there, I'm like, I couldn't do that job. How in God's name were you able to, like, endure this for so long?
Well, I will say, I cheated a little bit. CPAC, I went to a couple of the speeches, but I had this ticket that was like a student ticket. I also like, my friend forged a fake student ID for me, but like just like not like a laminated one, but like a picture of one, you know? So in case they asked me to prove I was a student, because a ticket's like $400, but a student ticket is like 50. So it's like a very elaborate, you know, setup. But I had the student ticket for $50 where you're like in a satellite room, so you're not in the same room as the stage. And it was very boring. And throughout the entire time I was undercover, it was actually extremely rare for me to go to any of these speeches. So I would buy tickets for $50, $1,000, whatever. And unless it was something that was not going to be live streamed, I wouldn't go. I if you know, like, because you can watch it, like you can watch, you know, see, like you're saying, anybody can watch
Yeah.
it. You don't need to be there. So I just go to the bar and talk to people there instead.
Oh man. All right. So this movie, Fight Club, I know Joey has some feelings about it. I have some feelings about it. I often don't know kind of exactly what to think about it. But one of the things we do is we start by asking our guests what would their first experience with Fight Club was, or what the movie that we're talking about was. So when was the first time you saw Fight Club? And also, like, broadly, how do you feel about this movie?
Oh my God. I mean, the first time I saw this movie, like literally 100 years ago. I mean, like, I mean, it
It
had to be
can't
within
be
a
more than
year.
23, but yeah.
Yeah, it had to be within a year of it coming out. I mean, because I
Okay.
was 10 or like 11, I think. Like, because it was like 2099, 98, somewhere around there, right? So it
It was
had to be
99,
after
yeah.
it was not in theaters anymore because I don't like think that my parents would have taken me to see Fight Club. But I certainly saw it almost immediately when it was out. And I liked it quite a bit.
Why did you want to see it?
Because it's what you want to do. uh,
When you're 10?
Yeah. So if it was 99, I would have been 11. So I would have been like 12, right? By the time it was out. But yeah, you know, I used to go to Blockbuster and like whatever movies, especially the things you weren't supposed to see. Like, hell yeah. You want to rent them all and watch them all.
Joey, we seem to have a theme emerging here that a lot of
Yeah, we have people, women who were 10 or 11 in 1999 who had parents who let them run amok, apparently.
I was raised evangelical. But
Yes.
my parents were not very good at internet. So I was able to get around a lot of, and also like then my dad was like pretty lazy about religion. Like he was the religious one, but also kind of lazy about it. So it come in spurts. So it was more like the hateful stuff we were really on board with, but like the having to do things or not do things we weren't so on board with, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got kind of free reign of books and movies and internet. I was very lucky.
Our guest for The Sixth Sense was 8 when it came out and saw it in the theaters.
I
So,
saw that in the theater as well. Yeah.
but
That
also
was cool,
raised
right?
evangelical. So she was also a fundamentalist when she, like, it's
And our Blair Witch guest saw that way too soon, too.
that's true.
I was
Yeah.
the Blair Witch for Halloween that year it came out. I took the sticks and I made the sticks.
But
John, we have two very disturbing trends here. Everybody gets
Everybody
COVID,
gets
and we're meeting people who I don't know. We need to. It's wild. I don't even know. It's not good or bad. It's surprising, I guess.
all right, Amanda, I got 2 things to clarify and one thing to ask. Well, one to clarify, one to ask. Well, the first is that we're not going to give you COVID. You only get COVID before you come on the show, so don't
Oh,
worry. You're not going to get it from the podcast.
that's good to know.
Yeah.
That's good.
The other is, like, the Blair Witch doesn't look like anything, so are you the Blair Witch for
Oh, I
Halloween?
dressed like a witch and I took sticks, you know, like she hangs the sticks everywhere and I wrapped up the sticks like in the movie and I carried it around with me. And like maybe 5% of people got it, but the ones who got it really liked it.
I think you're the target audience for this podcast. I really do. Like, it seems like 99 was a very significant year for you in popular culture. Joey,
Mm-hmm.
when did you first see Fight Club?
Same story. It was college. I remember in terms of the I guess sort of to cement my bad boy status on here, this was the first movie that I ever illegally downloaded. It took me 30 hours at 5 kilobits a second. And then when I downloaded it, it was in the wrong aspect ratio and it was unwatchable. And so I immediately deleted it. And that was my first ever piracy experience. So then I think I had seen it already, or maybe I was just like, fuck, I'm going to spend $11 and buy the DVD or something like that. Right. But I saw this for the first time in college, like almost all the other movies on this podcast. And yeah.
I feel like you illegally downloading this movie is the right thing to do, because I feel like that is consistent in some way with kind of the ethic.
Of course.
Of
I will say that this is maybe, I don't know if this is true of other movies that we're going to cover on here, but I have seen this in theaters.
Mm-hmm.
The Alamo Drafthouse did a showing in Yonkers a couple years ago, and me and Mike Manzi went, and I came with like a t-shirt with a really buff penguin that says Slide underneath it. So I have that somewhere. But I have seen this one in theaters, just not in 99. It was more like 2019 or something. So maybe it was the 20th anniversary. I don't know. But yeah, in the last 5 years, I've seen this in theaters.
I had read the book for some reason. I had like a weird friend who was like a Palahniuk guy, and I read the book and I was like, I guess that's kind of interesting. I don't know. And I kind of had the same feeling about the movie when I saw it. And I kind of still have that feeling about the movie. Like I really, maybe one or both of you can change my mind. I have very mixed feelings about this movie. I don't know if I like it or if I just think it's weirdly prescient.
Well, I don't know if I should say my thought first, or Amanda, what do you think of the movie before I, share my thoughts and try to persuade John one way or the other? What do you think of the movie, I guess, in 99 and also today?
I mean, I liked it a lot when I saw it, when it first came out. And I mean, I've seen it at different stages in my life, because it's like one of those movies you just put on. And so that has stayed. Like I've always liked it. I do not know, like if it came out today and it was my first time ever seeing it today, I don't know that I would like it. But I have consistently enjoyed the movie in the time it's been out, if that makes sense.
Because I think, so I love this movie. I wasn't sure. I sort of wavered a little bit while watching it this time. But then by the end, I was like, no, I'm fully on board. I think I also like the book a lot. I was a huge Palahniuk fan. Like I would say for probably years of my life, I would have said that he was my favorite author. And then he just stopped writing good books.
Yeah.
But I love this movie. What I love about this movie in particular is that along with like, I don't remember where I got this from. This is not my original idea, but there's this movie, there's like Spring Breakers and Josie and the Pussycats that are all directly targeting an audience that they are satirizing. That they are basically like, this is appealing to like aggro cool bros. Like, wouldn't it be awesome to start a fight club, man? And then the whole movie is like, no, you're an idiot. Stop. Don't do that. Or like Spring Breakers, like, hey, party kids, come down to Miami and get like fucked up and like shoot people. It's like, no, this is dumb. Like, this is a bad lifestyle. And the same thing with Josie and Pussycats. Like, I like that there are movies that are trying to extract money from the audience. They are saying you are making bad life decisions to a certain extent, or not. Josie's not necessarily negative like that, but it's satirizing like the pop music industry in a way. And I think to the point of like, if this came out today, like a couple years ago when Todd Phillips' Joker came out, I was like, oh no, this seems dangerous. This seems like it's a bad idea. Mm-hmm. And I think that if this had come out in 2018, 2019, whenever Joker came out, I would maybe think the same thing. But I think that there is enough prescience, and I think with the source material and just the way that like people not understanding what this movie really is, I think it adds up to a thing that I can't help but love and admire.
Oh my God, you're giving me like an internal crisis because I love the Joker movie. And I am the one who just sat here and said, I don't know if I would like Fight Club if it came out now.
I think the Joker, is it Joker or the Joker?
I have no idea.
Now
I think it's just Joker. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's the Batman, but it's just Joker. Right. Okay. It's so cool how we have all these movies that are the same. I think that Joker is like, hey, wouldn't it be cool? Like, it's the thing that like, it's the idea of the Heath Ledger Joker from The Dark Knight, but it's like, wouldn't it be cool if there was like anarchy and stuff and like happening in the middle of the Trump stuff? It's just like, oh, this seems reckless. Like this seems. Also, I just don't think it's a very good movie. I think it's also a blatant ripoff of like Scorsese movies and whatever.
Sure.
And just I don't enjoy it. But I do think that this movie and Joker share DNA in more ways than one.
Yeah. Amanda, what is it you like about Joker?
I don't. I mean, I love. I will say I love bad entertainment. So like I only watch like reality TV. I don't really
Sure.
read books. I mean, like I read nonfiction books, but I don't like read for pleasure unless it's like young adult fiction, you know? So I think Joker
Hmm.
was probably pretty up my alley in general. Just like, like mediocre stuff that's like budgeted and marketed towards a very wide audience. It's the kind of stuff that I like because I don't have to pay a lot of attention to it.
Yeah. No, Joe, I think it's a fair comparison in that there is something that would seem like if Fight Club came out today, I think that the kind of moral reaction to it would be very different,
Hmm.
um, sort of across the entire kind of cultural spectrum. I've been grappling with this a lot too because, like, in a lot of ways, this and our last movie, American Beauty, you know, like a lot of it is you have to look at it within the context of the time, but then also like, does it work as satire? And what I think I always kind of come back to about Fight Club is like whether or not what you were talking about, the sort of like machismo alt right bros, being like, fuck the system and like all that stuff. Um, Whether or not like they are right to see the movie as validating their perspective. I mean, I think kind of objectively the answer is no, that like David Fincher means it to be a satire. Um, but like Amanda, this is again like one of the things I wanted to ask you about. Does this movie kind of have a role in the sort of like Proud Boys culture? Like, is this like one of those movies that they look to for um, spiritual guidance, for lack of a better term?
So I'm gonna have a very disappointing answer for you, which is that I don't really know. I didn't really, as undercover, I didn't really deal with Proud Boys too often.
Yeah,
And even if I had, I certainly wouldn't have been privy to any discussion, kind of along those lines because it wouldn't have been my role.
yeah.
But I know, like I've seen Fight Club come through, whether in meme format or like literally like think pieces written about it that have been shared and bounced around through different factions of the far right over the years, not just the ones who were like the violent, dipshits like the Proud Boys, but like everybody, right? Like
Yeah.
it's definitely had some impact on these people.
Joey,
Hmm.
if I was to ask you not what Fight Club is about in terms of plot, but what's it about?
Well, I think to answer that, I was going to say, like, I think in terms of the why it's a satire, I think it starts out being a thing where you're supposed to question the world around you and like it's anti-capitalist and anti-consumer and all this different stuff, right? And then by the end it becomes this machine where no one is thinking for themselves and they're all just this hive mind, and it's dangerous, I think, like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it goes from being kind of like a, hey, like think about what's going on in the world and like you might learn a thing or two, or you might want to question the world around you, and then all of a sudden it becomes like a cult movie. And I think that it happens in a hurry. Like I think for a while, not that Tyler Durden is necessarily someone you should like aspire or admire to be, but I think like he makes some, pretty okay points for a while. And then all of a sudden, kind of when he goes away in the middle of the movie, it's like, oh no, this is kind of chaos now and no one knows what they're doing. And, we're too far down the path to sort of to change course now. I think it's just about, uh, I don't know. I don't know. Questioning the world around you, anti-capitalist, anti-consumer, um, not putting up with bullshit, and then the dangers of what all that happens when, like, but also I think the goal, not the goal that the movie makes, but the goal that Fincher is and Pollock is alluding to is like, hey, you should continue to question the world around you. Just because somebody like makes you question things once doesn't mean that that's right forever as well.
Yeah,
Maybe. I don't
maybe.
know, maybe.
Amanda, do you have any thoughts as to like how you read this movie?
So I will say something. Maybe it's controversial. So
Sure.
I recently talked about this on Twitter. So Wolf of Wall Street is one of my favorite movies of all
Okay.
time.
Love it.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And I like had to take it out of dating profiles because it was attracting a certain type of guy who like was a little too into that movie, and like and just
Interesting.
unable to understand the actual point of the movie, but was just like, man, wouldn't it be super cool if we could just do benzos and drive our cars around? And it's like, no, that's not. That's what you took from this. And I'm sitting here thinking, and it's like, I remember when I was in high school. So I went like 2002, 2006, and like I remember that this was a movie that like I at some point made a decision in my mind to just not tell people I liked because that was the exact same problem where there would
Mhm.
be these boys in high school who'd be like, "Oh, you like Fight Club?" And it's like, "Okay, I think that we're not on the same like level. We're not on the same page." Yeah, and so I'm sorry, this is like a little bit derailing, but like
No, that's great.
while you were talking, it just like that like memory that I've like repressed came back over me. Just being like, oh man, wait.
I think the Wolf of Wall Street comparison is great too, because I think like I love that movie because I think Leonardo DiCaprio has like never been better than in that movie. I think he shows off that he's funny. It's like that you're not allowed to be this handsome and this good of an actor and this funny all like it's just not fair. Like there's a whole lot going on there, but yes, it's like, wouldn't it be cool if we were like Jordan Belfort's so cool? Like, I want to be that rich and like just like not play by the rules. It's like, no, you're not. You're missing the point. And I think that's a nice comparison too. Um, I don't know that that's necessarily targeting those people, but in the same way that this is targeting like kids who might actually want to join a fight club. But I think the comparison there that like attracting the wrong type of person is I can absolutely see that happening for the same type of dude who loved Fight Club in 99
Yeah.
and loved Wolf of Wall Street in like 2013 or whenever it came out, right? So yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I should put it back on my dating profiles, and then when they message me, I should be like, "Do you also enjoy Fight Club?" And why?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's really important to remember that like people are very stupid. So, you got to be careful about like the way that you present information because people are always going to take the dumbest interpretation of it and then be like, "Oh yeah, me too, bro." Um yeah, it's actually super interesting. This whole point, Joey, and I think that what you both are saying is exactly my sort of why I'm so kind of ambivalent about this movie. And like Roger Ebert's review of it from the time deals with this a lot. He gave it a pretty mediocre review. Basically, it said like the first third of it is great, and then it sort of descends into violence and chaos and idiocy. Which
But I think it has to.
yeah,
I think it
yeah,
has to.
yeah. I don't think it's necessarily wrong, objectively, but he also kind of makes the point that he's like, I feel as though people are going to leave this movie, the audience that it's directed towards, not like talking about Nietzsche, but like starting fights. And that's the problem. And I was like, I kind of think that's sort of what Amanda's talking about, right? It's like this, no, it's the wrong thing that you like about it, which is what I like about it. And so I don't think we're going to do very well. On a date. But also like Joey, it makes me think of when we talked to Chris about the Matrix, and it's a very similar kind of a thing going on at that time, which is a lot of like bros got the wrong impression about what the Matrix was as a story, and then figured that out in the second and third one, right? Because they were like, "Oh, what is this?"
Right. But I think that the Matrix is less I don't want to say less good, but they're not hiding it as well as this movie is.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
I think this movie is more insidious is the wrong word because it's hiding a good message or whatever. But I think it's easy to watch The Matrix the first time and be like, oh, there's like philosophy. There's stuff going on here. There's like I know that like I don't know who Nebuchadnezzar is, but I'm sure that that's somebody that I should probably look up. Like there's things in this just like it's so slick and Fincher knows what he's doing to the point where like I think it's harder to parse the actual message of this, which is maybe why I think it's also fair to like not like it or think it's dangerous.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
How do both of you guys feel about David Fincher in general? Amanda, are you a David Fincher fan?
I have no opinion in any direction.
Have you seen Seven or The Social Network? Or
Oh, okay, yeah. So I was gonna say, I have no understanding of like Like, I can barely remember to, like, eat food, you know? Like, I can't remember who's done what, media. Yes, I like both of those movies, actually. So I
Okay.
guess, yes, I'm a fan. It's like, don't ask me to name any, like, what is it, like, the name of songs by bands, because I can't do that either, but I might like that band. We just don't
I
know, you
I
know?
can't do it after like 1998, but I'm pretty good up until then. I recently learned how to identify 2 Harry Styles songs because of my children. So, I'm getting.
Well, he's only the most popular artist in the world, so,
I wouldn't
there
even
you
know
go.
that. Joey, how do you feel about David Fincher?
I've seen all of his movies.
Yeah.
I think I appreciate them. I think his newer ones I need to watch again because they kind of leave me cold. Like there's something that he's doing very specifically that I can't unlock on the first time.
Mm-hmm.
But I love this movie. Obviously, I think Zodiac might be like one of the best movies ever made.
Mm.
Mindhunter, the Netflix series, is phenomenal. Really like Seven, in spite of who the villain is in that movie, and I think it's indisputable that he's like one of the best dudes working. It's just like I wish that I liked Gone Girl and Social Network and Mank more than I actually do.
Yeah, I was thinking about sort of like what makes Fincher Fincher, and I think that even though he is a nice dude, and I think some of his movies, like Benjamin Button, have sort of a charming kind of affirming quality to them. There's this nihilism, I think, that is part of the Fincher aesthetic, right? And like even in
Mhm.
like House of Cards, which he produced, and Mindhunters, another good example, and Zodiac, and Social Network, and so forth. And I wonder, like, in some way, if my feeling about this movie is in some way kind of driven by that, because I feel that some of the
Do you like him more than you like Sam Mendes?
yes,
Okay, good.
I mean, much. Look, I love Seven. I love this. I love his work. I pretty much love all of his. Like, it's nothing about he hasn't done anything where I'm just like, oh, it's trash, right? As far as I can think.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, maybe Alien 3.
I love Alien 3.
I've
So
only seen it once. I can't really talk shit about it. I'm sorry.
yeah, no, I love Alien 3. But yeah, somehow like the Fincherness, the bleakness of Fincher, I think in some ways kind of undermines what could have been some of the sort of more I don't know, satirical comedy that this movie tries to do, and his kind of Fincherness gets in the way. I don't know if I'm saying that in a way that is at all like understandable, but I think that's sort of where I never quite go all in, right? In sort of
Was
my
there
love
so
of
is
this
there
movie.
is there a director you think would have made this movie in a way that you would have appreciated more?
Stanley Kubrick. Like, I don't
Well,
know.
no, but like, I think that Fincher is the modern Stanley Kubrick in terms of how he makes movies, in terms of the like, I'll do 100 takes until you get it the way that I want it to get.
Yeah.
They're like that's the best comp. But you think, yeah, I mean, okay,
Okay. So, look, this is a great opportunity to have a conversation that I think the whole world needs to have all the time. And that conversation is Brad Pitt a good actor? So,
yes,
okay,
full
we'll
stop.
come back to you, Amanda.
Yeah, I think he's fine. Do we not like Brad Pitt? Is that what's happening here? Hold on, because
I'm
No,
not sure. I
could
did
have
not think this
been.
question was coming, so I don't know where this is coming from. To
so
be
I
honest,
love Brad Pitt, but I
I
feel
mean,
like
it's like
Brad
who
Pitt,
else could have done it at that point in time? And I think that
yeah,
he's definitely the best person for it.
I agree with that. Joey, Brad Pitt, yes, a good
Mhm.
actor. Defend that position.
Well, so I think that he's stuck in this position in which he should be our greatest character actor of all time, and he's too handsome for that.
Oh, that's a great point.
Um, that he is like when you think back at the movies like True Romance where he plays fucking Floyd, and it's just like this is the funniest thing I've ever seen, and yet he's too handsome to not be the lead of a movie. And I think all he wants to do is kind of make weird movies and sort of be weird and be like a character, and he's not able to because they're like, well, we have Brad Pitt, and so like movies like the Lost City of well, they just dropped it. I think it's the Lost City.
Yeah.
It's really called the Lost City of D, but now it's just the Lost City. But like he plays like this over the top character, and sort of spoilers for that movie. He's only on screen for like 5 minutes, and it's so good. But there's this whole thing. Like I just think he like exudes cool in a way.
Yeah.
Like around the turn of the century, there were like 3 actors I really liked because they just happened to be in movies that I loved. It was him, and it was Edward Norton, and it was Matt Damon, and they all kind of overlapped in like Rounders and Ocean's 11 and whatever. And I think to the question you asked Amanda in terms of a performance that stands out here, it's nice to see Edward Norton in a role where he doesn't look like he wants to kill himself. Like I've watched The Italian Job for 2 different podcasts recently, and he didn't want to do that movie, and the entire time you can see it on his face, just
Yeah.
like, please just get literally anyone else. Like, I know you have a contract with him, but like, he doesn't want to be here. Let's do it with anybody else. And so to see him like with life in his eyes, it's like, it's really cool. But yes, to answer your original question, I think Brad Pitt's a great actor, and I think he's just too beautiful to do the type of work he really wants to do.
It's a great point.
Thank you.
But, you know, Leo can do whatever he wants, which is, you know,
but he can't really. Like, he's
true.
not character actor either.
You're right. Yeah. Although Don't Look Up is kind of, whatever. Anyways,
movie's garbage.
Okay, so the other question then is, we can talk about that. Ed Norton. How do you feel about Ed Norton?
I really liked him. I mean, it was this in
do you like him in general, though?
I will not go see a movie because he's in it in a way that I would for Brad Pitt or Matt Damon.
I actually feel very similar. I like what was that movie with Matt Damon where he's like stuck on Mars?
The Martian.
Yeah. Like I told you, I don't know names of things. I can't. I just watch and I listen and I don't retain. But like that was it was good. His performance was very good, and like that had to be quite hard to do so much of it completely alone. And so, like, yeah, I would go, you know, see a movie for him. If it had been Edward Norton in that role, I don't think I would have thought about it in either direction. I just would have been like, if it gets good reviews, maybe I'll go see it. So I feel pretty similar. Like, I won't go see a movie because he's in it, but I think that he's like a good actor. It's funny because I always associate him with American History X and not this movie for some reason. Yeah. I completely gloss over this one. So, I mean, but that's not to say that he didn't like do a forgettable job. That's just like a me problem, I think. Because I always think about Brad Pitt with this movie first.
I think Ed Norton has fallen into the, like, not trap, but all he does really anymore is Wes Anderson movies. Like, he's in all of his movies and like just is either doing plays or something. He was in that movie Motherless Brooklyn that I wanted to see but haven't seen yet. Yeah. But like, I can't think of other movies he's like led in the last 10 or 15 years.
That's true. And I hate Wes Anderson. So
me too. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Start a I Hate Wes Anderson podcast.
Like, I'm looking on Edward Norton's filmography, and like there's Motherless Brooklyn, and then it's just like he's not the lead, and you have to go back all the way to like, I don't know, maybe Leaves of Grass, a movie I don't know, but then like there's like the Hulk or the Incredible Hulk or whatever that was called, which was not good. The Illusionist, which I don't remember seeing, and then you're almost back in like around this time, The Italian Job and 25th Hour and American History X in this movie. Like he's not really been a leading man, a draw at the box office or whatever, you know.
But he's not.
In 20 years.
He doesn't really work in that role. And the thing is, like, the reason I kind of wanted to have this like side conversation here about these two actors is that I think the one thing that will always kind of be true of Fight Club for me is that I think it's like made the best use of both of their talents as like where they fit into movies and sort of how they sell them, because like Brad Pitt is like the co-star of this movie, but it was sold with Brad Pitt, right? Like it wasn't sold with Ed Norton. But they are both perfectly cast and the performances are perfect and it plays to both of their strengths, right? Including like what Joey, you point out about Pitt, that he is just like way too good looking to be sort of, you know, a Paul Giamatti type, right? But like that's sort of where he does his best work. Ed Norton, to me, like the first time I saw him was in Primal Fear, where he got an Oscar nomination for, and like I love that movie and love that performance, but like it's very difficult to like be that good and then also like carve a sort of starring, you know, like vehicle role for yourself in that industry with that. So like I do think it's the perfect kind of Brad Pitt and Ed Norton movie, and I think basically like, everybody in this movie is perfectly cast. Like even Jared Leto. Speaking of Jokers, I shouldn't have brought up that terrible.
No, he's great in this movie. Helena Bonham Carter is incredible in this movie. Meatloaf is great in this movie. Yeah. Like everyone who's asked to do something of like some significance is really, really good.
Yeah. I'm sorry I reminded us all that Jared Leto played the Joker once, but
it's really twisted. I do like his Joker though, to a certain extent. Really? I don't like the movies he's in, but I like his Joker. So,
So Amanda, question before we move on to our kind of final questions here. I'm interested that you brought up American History X. So it makes me now think like, wow, weirdly, Edward Norton predicted quite a bit about sort of the turn that American masculinity would take in the Trump years. So he talked a little bit about like the way that Fight Club is sort of embraced by a lot of people on the far right, even if they are sort of misinterpreting what it is. What about American History X? And when you think about that movie now, sort of in the context of the way that neo-Nazis and sort of far-right fascism have come to the surface in America, how relevant do you think that movie kind of still is based on your own experience?
Relevant enough that I don't think I would watch it if you paid me to. I mean, like today, like
Yeah.
it's just not like part of why my media consumption has like just nosedived in terms of like intellectual appeal or like like whatever I in the past few years has been, like real life sucks enough. I don't really need to think about it. I'd rather just like watch Kim Kardashian. Um, and so, yeah, I think it's something that I would not want to watch now. So obviously, I have seen it several times in the past. Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I will say, no one at least ever talked to me about it while I was undercover. So that's nice.
So neo-Nazis don't look at it as kind of an aspirational film, is what you're saying?
It's a small miracle so far.
Yeah, it's funny. Like that's another movie that a lot of like film bros loved, but like for I think the right reason. I don't know. Like I never met anybody who was like, "Oh, it's so rad." Edward Norton's character.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I remember watching it the first time. It was more age appropriate. I wasn't like 7 years old in the theater.
yeah,
But my high school boyfriend was like, "Oh, yeah, you've never seen this? I can't believe you've never seen this." And so, like that was how I first saw it, and like that. I mean, I remember that very clearly, obviously, as opposed to Fight Club. Of course, because I was older. um, but yeah, like I never have met anybody with American History X who's like a lunatic, can't understand basic, like comprehend how to watch a movie.
yeah.
Unlike Fight Club, which does have a lot of that.
So yeah, I for both of you, there's this. I don't know if you guys have seen um, the HBO documentary about Woodstock '99. Joe, we should talk about it for the podcast at some point. Just like
Okay. Yeah, I've not seen it. I know about it, but I know I have friends who sort of talked to me about it, but I've not seen it yet.
It's really interesting. Amanda, have you seen it?
I have not.
So I recommend it to both of you. But like, what I find really interesting and sort of thinking about this movie again after having watched that is like the thesis of that documentary is basically that it was okay. Well, let me pause for a second. Do either of you like know what happened in Woodstock '99? Like why it's notorious?
A lot of racism and stuff, right? Like it was a very like
Sexual assault. Yeah,
fan bases of like basically coincidentally or not brought together fan bases of like or like the most toxic fan bases of all these artists that like just new metal and stuff like that,
yeah.
and it just and as sort of happened in the original Woodstock, like they were not prepared for what they invited.
Like a more racist fire festival for regular people. The rundown that seemed like.
Yeah, it's not a bad comparison. I mean, in terms of the utter fiasco, unlike Fire Festival, like Woodstock '99 happened, but yeah, so the thesis that the documentary presents basically is that it was on top of kind of a model of late stage capitalism, that it was this thing where like money was just the bottom line and they were completely unprepared. Like it was like 100 degrees every day. There was nowhere to get water. Like none of the like toilets worked or were accepted. It was just a complete, sort of organizational fiasco. But it also sort of draws the idea that on top of that, like one of the things that we talk about in this podcast is sort of, the kind of culture, like where we were culturally in 99 and sort of that like pre Y2K anxiety and all that sort of thing, the way that plays out in some of the art and pop culture. That the the music, like the headliner was like Limp Bizkit, right? And like Korn was there, and like Rage Against the Machine was there as well, and like the Chili Peppers. But it was just this meeting of like mostly young white men who were like wanted to be pissed off about something, but like had nothing to be pissed off about, right? And like the
As young white men often feel, and often, that's never not been true.
yeah, and kind of the complacency of the late 90s kind of like feeding into that in this weird way that like, and I think Fight Club also sort of addresses that, I guess, in the way of like the whole consumerism angle and like the IKEA catalog and all that sort of thing. But anyway, it's a really interesting thing. I think it like, when I was trying to put this movie into kind of historical context, and I seeing that kind of really helped, I think, sort of illuminate some of the what Fincher, successfully or not, was trying to critique. And I would, anyway, to anybody listening, recommend that as sort of a double feature to watch Fight Club and then also watch the Woodstock 99 documentary. But yeah, we'll talk about that again sometime on this show.
Wait, though, I gotta say something because, all right, so you're telling me hot as hell every day. There's no shade. There's no easily accessible water, and the toilets don't work.
Yeah.
And it's a bunch of angry white men. I just spent a year paying thousands of dollars to do that. If you want Woodstock 99 without the music, just go to your closest overpriced Republican event and live that, because I have over and over like a nightmare. So yeah, I mean that's 100%.
Yeah, but like you didn't get to see Limp Bizkit perform last year, so like
I mean,
who really came out on
died
top?
of heat exhaustion. Like you also did not get to see Limp Bizkit perform.
But you might get to see Kid Rock, who also was at 99. So
there was a woman who she does a remix of that Dolly Parton song, Jolene, and it's about the vaccine and how bad it is. I mean, who doesn't want to see that? That's good. It's really good.
Oh, we are doing great as a culture. Okay, don't go to any Republican events. Just watch the movie. You don't have to you don't have to pay thousands of dollars to suffer, unless you're Amanda. But then you get to write about it and stuff. So I guess there is something of an upside. Okay, so thumbs up for Fight Club. Is that what we're saying?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm keeping track on Letterboxd of all the movies we covered for the podcast in order. I have this number 3 right now of the 7 we've done.
Okay. Still worth watching today? Would you recommend it to someone who hasn't watched it, Amanda?
Oh yeah, I think so. I also feel like it's such a part of culture. Like it's one of those things where you get references from it, even if you've never seen it. Like you might associate the reference with a different form of media. I think that people should watch it.
John, do you think that we talked about this on the Sixth Sense episode? Do you think there are people out there who have not seen this movie?
That's a great question.
Like, I think that we were talking about, like, can you find someone who at least doesn't know the twist? Or, like, it's the same thing here. Yeah. Like, this is another movie that's not predicated on a twist, but is built around a big twist. Are there people out there who have not seen Fight Club that would want to see Fight Club?
Well, of the, I guess the 3 movies that we've talked about where some reference in that movie is directly associated with today. So like red pilling, obviously, in The Matrix. And then, red pill, blue pill, I should say. And then, I See Dead People, and the first rule of Fight Club, right? Of those 3 kind of ubiquitous pop culture references, I would bet the one that people have least often seen is Fight Club. Like, I think there's probably, I don't know, I have no idea, I'm completely guessing, but I think there's like none of the students that I teach in high school have seen it. So
I'm actually going to look, and this is probably not going to be the most scientific, but in terms of Letterboxd, in terms of people who are like out looking for movies, the first Matrix movie has been seen by 1.3 million people. Sixth Sense 600,000, Fight Club 1.6 million. More people have logged Fight Club on Letterboxd than The Matrix or Sixth Sense.
That is shocking to me because I would have agreed with exactly what John said. Like, I would definitely assume more people have seen definitely The Matrix, and then probably The Sixth Sense, and then Fight Club, without a doubt. So that's wild.
Of the movies that we've done so far, the ones that have been seen the least, and these are all massive numbers. Like, we play the Letterboxd game on every episode of Too Fast, Too Forever, and we were watching movies at like 8,000 people have seen, or like for some like really early, like the Ryan Gosling movies that like you don't know are movies because like the only reason we watch them is because he's in them for the whatever, right? Like have been seen by like 30 people. It's like there's like the fact that these are like million plus is enormous. And the least seen of the 7 we've done so far are Eyes Wide Shut and Blair Witch, are both over 400,000.
Mm-hmm.
But that's still enormous for the site because there's not that many people on the site, right? It's not like there's like 100 million users. There's like a million or two, right?
Yeah.
So Fight Club by far the most popular of all the movies we've done, and then after those, Phantom Menace in third place or whatever. But yeah,
Well, I've got like 20,000 TikTok followers. We can quiz them.
Go for it.
They're going to be mostly all under 22 years old.
Yeah,
if you ask, if you have like a 4-question poll, which of these movies? Well, I don't know how you work that.
Which of these movies have you never heard of?
Yeah. Or which of these movies do you know the least about?
Yeah. Yeah. Which of these movies have you definitely not seen a lot? I don't know. Yeah, it's a hard thing to or like which of the following references are you most familiar with, right? Like we don't talk about Fight Club or something Blair Witch something.
I will also say, and I think Amanda said something about this earlier maybe, but I have not large swaths of this movie memorized in the way that I do with The Matrix, but like I was like wandering around my house doing things because like I know so many of the lines in this movie from having seen this probably 5 or 10 times and reading the book a couple times and just, you know, do not fuck with us. You're not your fucking khakis. Like all those things like I've seen and heard so many times that just sort of hit me either at the right time or the impressionable time or just permeated either my psyche or pop culture in a way that like, you know, who knows?
Yeah, I wonder if also like I'm a little bit skewed in my perspective because I do work with high schoolers, and so like I wonder if this is like a college movie, like what like Clockwork Orange was when I was in college, right? That sort of thing.
I will tell you that, including myself, that a lot of people that I knew in college had like a poster for this on their dorm room walls, and that was still 7 years after it came out. I can't imagine like in the early 2000s what it was like. So yeah. I think it's definitely a college bro movie.
Yeah,
for good and bad reasons.
Alas. Amanda, one more question for you before we Joey asks you our last couple of questions, the fun ones.
One more question before the more questions.
One more question before the fun questions at the end, which you have answers to, but who cares? One of the things about Fight Club is this idea of like the hidden underworld and the sort of like world that we are all sort of presented as a kind of Alice in Wonderland element to it. We talk a lot about rabbit holes lately, so my question for you along those lines is the amount of sort of neo-Nazism and white supremacy that we are all aware of when it comes to like the MAGA movement. How much worse is it? How much are we missing?
Well, that would require me having an understanding of like what the average baseline is, right? Because I can talk to 10 different people and have, 10 different like, oh no, things are like fine or like whatever. So I always like to clarify when I was undercover, I went to regular Republican events. I went to actual Nazi things. I was like friends with people who are Nazis. And then I went to QAnon things, and I put those in 3 different categories, and they like cross over with one another, but they are distinct. So the problem is that QAnon is really hard and weird, like for outsiders to, like come in. Like, when I wanted to be like the first person to tell my dad about QAnon, God forbid someone had just fucking church recruits him into it. Yeah. So I just went for the jugular. I was like, Dad, what do you think about the idea that Hillary Clinton is a pedophile who worships Satan? He's like, yeah. And I was like, and eats babies. And Donald Trump was chosen by God to stop her. And he was like, that's crazy. That's my line. And I was like, that's what I thought, Dad.
That's fair.
Nice. And so I feel like people on the outside looking in, it's like it just gets so convoluted. So what people don't see when they're looking at the QAnon weirdos is that there are a lot of influencers who are, putting little like seeds of Nazi ideology within what they're teaching when they're talking about how to interpret Q or how to save the children or whatever. And they don't really understand what they're hearing. And we just have no sense of history in this country. Like we don't understand his history at all. And so, there's stuff that they just don't know is being fed to them. And so I think it goes in QAnon. I think it's like a little bit more complex than everywhere else. As far as everything in terms of like normal Republican world, I would go to normal Republican events, but I would go with Nazis because they wanted to recruit people.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it's not great. I mean, when I was recruited to help get more congressmen into this organization, the key word there is more. They already had a caucus forming. So yeah, it's pretty bad. It runs pretty deep. And the thing is that like if people speak out against it on the right, they're kind of banished from the party. So if you want to win, you have to be accepting of it. And so I think people don't really get it. And I think Trump, he's such a buffoon that it. I used to even think this myself, but I would hear a lot of people say, "Oh, it's better to have Trump as president than, like Mike Pence himself, because Mike Pence is like competent." But the thing is that like Trump during his Twitter storms and, like whatever, all the stuff that he did,
Yeah.
I think it made people a little numb to fascism because he was, his rhetoric, everything about him was starting to lead the country into, being open to the idea of fascism. And so I think people dismiss things now that maybe should be taken more seriously because they think, oh, Trump, if that was going to happen, it would have happened under Trump or this or that. And it's not really like my understanding. And I will say, one of the things I would go to, I went to Turning Point USA, which is meant for college students.
Yeah.
And if you're a college student, like you can even go for free, and they'll pay for your travel, all that good stuff. If you've ever seen the list of like the professors that we must get rid of because they're, harming America by having the audacity to be like gay marriage is fine or whatever, that's probably spearheaded by Turning Point USA. So they're on college campuses all over, like catering to the far right crowd, but they're very mainstream. They're considered, extremely mainstream. But they harass, professors out of their jobs. Like they like harass people until they don't want to work at schools anymore. And they push this rhetoric against people who are, 18 to 22 years old. And it's very problematic. And like 5 years ago, there's a Nazi named Nick Fuentes, and they banned him from all Turning Point USA events because they have these little conferences a couple times a year, because that's really what being conservative about is, like getting together and talking about your grievances and how you're personally, being ostracized by society.
It's like a fight club.
Yeah. And they banned Nick Fuentes from coming to events, and then they would ban people who supported him. And people who supported him would show up and, ask like really like racist or terrible questions during Q&As with speakers, extremely anti-Semitic things, extremely like homophobic things. And so they started banning these people. But it's happening again, but with just like the next evolution of like what Nazis look like in America. And they're not banning these people. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
It's more, that rhetoric is now just more acceptable. You would have to ban a lot of people now if you wanted to ban someone for talking about repatriation. And so, yeah, I think most people are not paying enough attention. In conclusion,
is one of these congressional Nazis someone named Paul Gosar?
yeah. So the America First Caucus is the
Yeah.
caucus that my pals wrote. And it was definitely Gosar and Marjorie Taylor Greene were all in. Louis Gohmert was about to be in, and I was supposed to get Gates. The caucus got it got leaked, well, not from me, and so everybody like disavowed it, even though they all knew. But Gates is now pals with the guys who wrote it and comes to their events.
Awesome. So I think it's fair to say that like you would think that Fight Club is actually a lot more realistic now than when you did when you were 12 years old.
I think so, yeah. That'd be fair to say.
And after like talking to you, I kind of do as well. Okay, we are going to end on a stupid note. So, Joey, take it away.
Do you have a favorite movie from the year 1999?
Probably The Matrix. I mean, Matrix was my
Ooh.
first DVD. I've probably like I don't know 70 times.
Okay.
Yeah, so definitely The Matrix. I was just trying to think if my like perception had shifted if there was like something else that I would like more now, but I think it's still The Matrix.
And then do you have a favorite movie of all time? It can still also be The Matrix, or is there another movie that you like more? It could be a dumb movie or it could be a good movie. It doesn't have to be necessarily like a lofty, if you're just like, hey, this dumb movie just gets me through whatever.
Oh, it's Wolf of Wall Street without a doubt. It's my
Nice.
favorite.
Huh?
Yeah.
You might be the first guest we've had who like actually had answers and didn't have to think
Yeah.
about it. Like I feel like everybody, including me, has to like hem and haw and be like, I don't know what it's gonna be. But you had them, locked and loaded, which is impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I was so into The Matrix. It was so great. I don't know why people have to think about that.
It's also like the first person who knows what movies came out in '99, like knows The Matrix is because that was the first movie we covered in the show. So, well, great answers. And Amanda, I know you have a bunch of stuff on social media, etc. Anything that you want to direct people towards and or promote right now?
Oh, sure. I'm on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram as at no turtle soup 17. That's pretty much that. I've got like a bunch of videos, clips of horrible audio that I recorded. You'll love it. It's a lot of fun.
Can you explain where the whole like turtle soup thing came from?
Yeah. When I was undercover, I had a very small Twitter profile, and I went by the name Frank. And I had a picture of Franklin, the turtle from the children's book series Franklin, as my avatar. And then one day over the summer, Alex Jones, I was watching his show, and he started talking about turtle soup. And I was like, this is a shout out to me in my head. And so I made it that. And then 17 is a QAnon number. So I threw it on there for fun.
That's
You know,
amazing.
well,
Great story.
thank you. It's when he's talking about turtle soup, he's stripping. He's taking his shirt off, Alex is, and he's like doing a little sexy dance.
Yeah.
So it's really seared into my brain until I die. Yeah.
He's a very normal and stable person. So that
Yes.
makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
No notes, Alex J.
What I do like is that on your Twitter bio, 2 of the 3 people you have quoted saying, I guess, things about you have had their accounts suspended. So,
Yes.
You've almost got a tic-tac-toe 3 in a row.
We can only hope that Joseph Flynn is next.
All right, Amanda, thanks so much for joining us. A lot of fun. Joey, thank you as always, and we will catch you all next time.